Welcome to the WIHS Journal. On today's broadcast with me, I'll have Michael Ferris and his ministry, Journey to the Potter's House. That's being featured at Jacob's Well Coffee House this Friday, March 5th. I know, Michael, you have a tangible ministry. Not only is it powerful verbally, but you do something tangible that kind of depicts the way God molds and mends us. I'm not going to give it all away, but glad to be with you on the broadcast today. So for people who don't know you, just give us a little background on yourself.
Okay, Anissa, a little background on myself. Well, it's interesting. I trained as a psychologist and a marriage and family therapist, and I had a practice for many years. And that through some work that I had done there, I was then invited to a teaching post down at a graduate school in New York, just outside of New York City, and I was a graduate school professor for about 15 years, teaching counseling at a master's level. And then one of the classes I was teaching was a class on spiritual formation. And one of my philosophical assumptions I would teach to my students is if you're going to be effective as a counselor, you have to counsel out of your own place of brokenness and not out of your academic acumen, because anybody can read a book and parrot back what the book says. But if you haven't taken that journey yourself, you're not going to know what to do with your clients when you bring them to places you've never been, and you're going to hurt them. So as part of this class, I was doing some pottery, taking some pottery lessons with one of my children, and I was practicing pottery at home. And then one day God just spoke to me, and he showed me the processes that I was taking the clay through were the same processes God was taking me through as he was fashioning my life into the plans he had for me. And so I said, I got to show this to my class. And so I brought my wheel into my class, and there the class is 3 hours and 15 minutes long, so I have you for a while. And I just spent the whole time making pottery, talking to people about our brokenness and how the potter takes clay. You know, the primary pressure in this, the primary tool that the potter uses in this, when they fashion something out of clay, is they use a lot of pressure and a lot of pain. And so I was talking about how pain and adversity shape us into the people we become. But if we give our broken lives to Jesus Christ, he has this way of taking our shame and taking the pain we've carried and transforming that into something beautiful that can be poured out into the service of others. So this was the class, and unbeknownst to me, there was a woman in the class. Her and her husband pastored a church in the southern part of the state they lived in. And later that week, her husband called me, and he said, my wife is in your class, and she came home really shaken up, and she's not been the same. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this guy's mad at me. And then he says, listen, we pastor a church, and would you come to our church and do this same thing for our people? And so I did. And God used it, and I didn't know what I was going to say or what I was going to do. I just showed up with my potter's wheel. And God just has a way of using simple things to confound the wise and weak things to confound the mighty. And he just used it in an outrageous way. And then later on that week, I got a call from another guy. And he said, you were at a buddy of mine's church. Would you come to my church? And a few people called, and I wasn't paying much attention to it. But then people started calling me for the following year.
Wow.
And I thought, I'm going to write it down in my book. And I was in 33 churches the next year, then 43 churches the year after, then 65 churches the year after that. And then one day, I was coming out of a session with a client, and God just got a hold of me and said, what are you doing? He said, just give your life to this. Take it around the world, and I'll take care of you. And so I closed my practice, ultimately stepped down from teaching, set it up as a 501c3. We call it a Journey to the Potter's House. And I've been traveling with it now full-time for 13 years. We have a DVD that is in 20 countries. You can actually watch it on Amazon Prime Video. They've got a viewing platform of 100 million, and we've had it translated into another language. And so it's just unbelievable how God has been using this. And so what I do is I just travel to wherever I get an invitation, and I've been in many different countries, and I'll set up my wheel, and I will do an illustrated teaching using the potter's wheel. And, since its inception, we've also developed some workshops on counseling and soul care workshops that we do. Actually, we just finished one a couple weeks ago, and just all dealing with spiritual formation. And so it's just been a transformational ministry, and it's what I'm just going to do until Jesus calls me home. Thousands and thousands of people have come to faith in Christ through this ministry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you're tuning in right now, this is Michael Ferris and his ministry, A Journey to the Potter's House. I just love that depiction, the wheel and the clay and everything. So tell me, has there ever been a point, when you do the clay and you form that, do you ever give it away to participants, or how does that work when you're doing the ministry?
That's interesting because everybody wants to buy it. so well, I don't give it away because it's not been fired. It hasn't gone through the whole processes. And so, I illustrate the formation process and I talk about, the firing processes, but the clay does have to be fired. And so if you don't fire it, it's just going to dry up and then it'll just crumble. However, because this is a 501c3 and this is my full-time ministry now, I'm like a missionary. The Apostle Paul, he traveled throughout the Mediterranean and he preached the gospel and made tents. And I'm just traveling throughout the world preaching the gospel and making pottery. And as a result, the pottery becomes an important part of our income stream. So what I'll do is I usually bring an inventory with me. We have some pottery. We have a story that I tell during the service that we've had professionally illustrated and made into a book. And we've got DVD of the studio version of the lesson. So
how long does the whole sermon and, making the clay and all that, how long usually do you go for? Do you depend on the Holy Spirit, or do you have like a timed sermon, I should say?
Yes, well, the teaching in its entirety is 90 minutes long. And so usually, like a church will have me come and they'll just give me the morning service. And, maybe they might shorten their announcements and maybe sing, one or two less songs so they have the full 90 minutes. There was a woman there who had been in faith her whole life, and she said to her adult daughter and son-in-law, she says, when I die, I want to have this at my funeral.
Wow.
And then a few years ago, her son-in-law called me, and he told me about his mother-in-law's request, and he said, she died, would you come and do her funeral? I said, sure, because I figure this is evangelistic. This is about reaching people for Jesus, and I don't think the devil's going to call me up and ask me to come preach the gospel. So I said, absolutely, I'll come. And so I went. There was about 150 or so people there, and it was remarkable. Right in the church, it was a memorial service, and they had a family friend sang one song, and the daughter read a little testimony about her mom, and they turned the whole service over to me. And I'll tell you what, when it was done, probably 75 people gave their heart to Jesus. Preaching an evangelistic message at a funeral, you get a good response. But what was funny is after the service, several people came over to me and they said, when I die, I want to have this at my service too. So that was, nobody wanted to schedule that date though, but that was funny.
Wow. Yeah, definitely God using you all over. Our main purpose talking today was you're going to be at the coffee house, Jacob's Well Coffee House. So yes. What are you hoping that participants who show up there, that they'll take away from your sermon at the Master Potter from you?
That there's great hope, that God doesn't waste our suffering if we give it to him. We waste it when we try to manage it ourselves. But through this process, I show people how the potter takes the impurities and the brokenness and the things that contaminate the clay, and how he transforms that into something that is beautiful, into a vessel of honor that can be poured out into the service of others. And so the big thing I want people to take away is that there is hope through our brokenness. There is hope for our life. And of course, that really starts with a relationship with Christ, and there's an opportunity for people to say yes to the Lord in that. But when they come away from it, I just want people to have hope that, hey, look, life is hard. Jesus said, John 16:33, in this world, we're going to have tribulation. This is God's way of saying that life is hard. And all of us have pain in our life. That's one of the universal things about this message. That's why millions of people relate to it, is because we all have pain. And when people see that, that's what they relate to. And then when they see how the potter can take a broken vessel, or something that's been mired through life, and transform it into something beautiful, a vessel of honor.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Any other details you want to convey to our listeners before we close the broadcast today?
Well, you can, if you'd like more information about the ministry or any of the workshops that we offer, you can visit our website, thejourneytothepottershouse.com. If you'd like to see a studio version of it, watch it on Amazon Prime Video. Just type in The Journey to the Potter's House. It'll come right up, or you'll find it scrolling through their spiritual and documentary section as well. And, hey, we'd love to come to your church. And you know what? Through this COVID pandemic, international tour scheduled, and with the COVID thing, everybody got so scared and everybody canceled. However, I had a lot of people calling me, and they were doing house churches. So I was going and doing house churches. It was very much like the underground kind of church. It was really kind of neat going through different states and just doing this. So, yeah, please check us out, and we'd love to come to your church and bring this message, do an outreach service, and you'll never read those Potter scriptures the same way again. It'll change your life.
Once again, that was Michael Ferris and his ministry, A Journey to the Potter's House. He'll be featured at Jacob's Well Coffee House this Friday, March 5th. All the details can be found on our community calendar. For more details about the broadcast, call WIHS. Our phone number is 860-346-1049. The opinions expressed are those of the participants, not necessarily those of the staff and management of the station. I'm Anissa Porticelli for News and Public Affairs.